In the heart of the ancient forest, where the weirwood trees stood silent as sentinels, Rhaegar Targaryen stirred from a dreamless slumber. His silver-gold hair swept across his shoulders like strands of moonlight, though it was streaked now with pale touches of white. He could no longer remember precisely how long he had sat upon the roots of the colossal weirwood, body half engulfed by twisting bark that had grown around him as if to cradle and protect him. It might have been days, moons, or years. The concept of time had softened within him, for he had learned that a moment could be a century in the realm of the old gods, and that a man could live 1,000 lifetimes by merely opening his mind's eye in this sacred place. Night fell, and dawn rose beyond the thick canopy, and when spears of light pierced the leaves overhead, they revealed dust motes swirling like flecks of gold. Birds called from branches above, oblivious to the slow but momentous metamorphosis taking place within the heart of the grove. He was not alone. All around him the whispering faces of carved weirwoods stretched back into an infinite tapestry, each pair of eyes bleached white with centuries of watchfulness. The weirwoods in the grove peered upon him, and in their presence he felt the accumulated weight of history, an unbroken chain of watchers, from the children of the forest to the greenseers who had come before him. Their presence was tangible, an enveloping hush that made his heart thunder in its solitude. When he breathed, he heard echoes of laughter that belonged to no one alive. When he blinked, he tasted a memory not his own, perhaps from a king who ruled thousands of years ago, or a child who once played under these branches, in ages long forgotten. He was Rhaegar Targaryen, once heir to the Iron Throne, once a warrior who died on the trident for the cause he believed was his destiny, once a man whose passions had lit the fire of rebellion across the 7 kingdoms. Yet here, in this twilight realm of intertwined roots and centuries, he was something else. He had inherited a mantle more ancient than any Targaryen crown, the mantle of the three-eyed raven. Whether by fate, by the design of the old gods, or by the cyclical nature of prophecy, he had risen after his mortal end, carried across the threshold of life and death. He recalled the final blow from Robert Baratheon's warhammer. He recalled the sensation of water swallowing him, red with his own blood. And then he recalled an awakening to a world of white trees and silent watchers. What had called him here? His belief in prophecy? A destiny that demanded he safeguard the realm from a threat far greater than mortal kings. Or had he merely found a path to redemption? On this day, he stirred amid the roots, leaning forward, the pale greenseer's eyes open wide and unblinking, as he reached deeper into the currents of history. The old gods permitted him to glimpse the past, to roam the tapestry of what was, and with each journey, he discovered something new about himself as well. At first, he had trembled at the endless swirl of images, the forging of the 7 kingdoms under Aegon the Conqueror, the laughter of children in the courtyard of Winterfell, the king beyond the wall's incursion, and subsequent defeat. But now, these images came to him as easily as breath, threaded together as if they were all happening at once. He saw sword fights in the skies above, dragons locked in mortal combat, the field of fire that ended the rule of many petty kings. He saw the madness of the Targaryens creeping in, each generation bearing the weight of an ancient bloodline, born in Valeria's burning shadow. Time was as pliable as clay in his mind, a mosaic he could rearrange at will. Yet the more he traveled through the labyrinth of time, the more his soul ached. Regrets gnawed at him. He had lived a life devoted to prophecy, believing he was the prince that was promised. He had pinned his hopes on a legacy of dragonspawn, meant to save the world. And in the end, all his grand designs had crumbled at the trident, scattering his family to the winds. Could he change that fate? The powers that had opened to him now suggested he might. The old gods and the voices of the weirwoods did not forbid the thought. They merely watched him. Had they always known he would stand at this threshold, torn between preserving the natural flow of time and succumbing to the temptation to reshape it? In dreamlike visions, he had wandered the corridors of his youth. The Red Keep with its winding passages, the smoky great hall, his father's half-glazed eyes glowering from the Iron Throne. He felt the echoes of Aerys's madness emanating from the scorched shadows. The scorn of the court turned silent when Rhaegar entered. He felt the distant hum of the realm's discontent with Targaryen rule. With each vision, the old regrets returned, blossoming in his heart. If he had stayed his father's hand, if he had done this or that differently, perhaps the realm might never have plunged into rebellion. Perhaps Lyanna Stark might not have died. Perhaps his children, his dear Rhaenys and Aegon, would have lived. 1,000 maybes tortured him, unraveling within his mind, until he pulled away from the vision in pained exhaustion. In the quiet glade of the forest, the wind rustled, and the weirwoods watched as if they pitied him. He breathed. The forest breathed with him. Each day, if days they could be called, he sank deeper into the powers of the Greenseer. At times, he reached out to the living. He caught glimpses of a far distant time beyond his, a new generation of Targaryens, Lannisters, and Starks, forging uneasy alliances, or clashing beneath banners he did not recognize. He saw dragons once again in the sky, though whether that was his memory or a possible future, he could not say. There were moments when he sensed presences reaching back toward him, mortals curious or awed by fleeting visions. Yet no direct contact was established. Rhaegar sensed that he was in a transitional state, neither lost to time nor wholly bound to it. He felt the question of whether he should remain a passive witness, simply ensuring the timeline's continuity, or dare to play the game of the gods by molding the past into a shape he desired. Temptation nagged at him like a persistent wound, an ache that would not cease no matter how he shifted among the roots. He recalled the face of Elia Martell, her kind eyes, the softness in her voice on the nights they spent discussing the future of their children. He remembered the hope she held that House Targaryen and House Martell might bring peace to the realm through a stable inheritance. And he remembered, with a pang of guilt, his obsession with prophecy that had led him astray, drawn him to Lyanna Stark, and set the world on fire with suspicion and war. In a swirl of bark and memory, he could see them both. Perhaps, if he wielded his Greenseer power with intention, he could intervene in his own story. He could whisper suggestions into his past self's dreams, ensuring that the man who had once been Rhaegar Targaryen might act more wisely. Perhaps the tide of bloodshed could be stemmed, but the old gods were silent on whether they would allow such manipulations. A voice, or perhaps many voices speaking as one, sometimes brushed his mind with a warning. Meddle too deeply, and the tapestry might tear. Destiny had a way of setting itself right, rewriting itself, around those who attempted to alter it. It was said that the three-eyed raven was meant to observe, to guide gently. Yet Rhaegar wondered if the might of his Targaryen blood, combined with this Greenseer's inheritance, could surpass the boundaries that had held earlier Greenseers captive to passivity. He had always been a dreamer, always reached for more than the world offered. Could he not do the same now, even in this new life? The forest was alive with secrets. Some nights, when the moon rose high, and the wolves howled beyond the grove, Rhaegar felt the presence of the children of the forest, those reclusive beings who once roamed these lands freely. He heard their gentle footfalls in the distance, sensed their age-old magic in the quiet air. They never revealed themselves fully. They were shy, patient observers, trusting only those who truly belonged to the weirwoods. Yet he felt their sympathy, or so it seemed in the subtle shift of the branches. They had seen the devastation wrought by man, the heartbreak of wars, the uprooting of their own kin. Maybe they were neither for nor against the meddling in human affairs. Their concerns seemed to lie deeper, with the cyclical balance of life and death, with the white walkers that sometimes glimmered at the edge of Rhaegar's visions, a dreadful presence far more ancient than any mortal throne. Once, in the blackness of a vision-laden trance, Rhaegar found himself standing on the edge of the world. Ice stretched before him, an endless plain of frozen desolation. The darkness over that plain was alive with shimmering shapes, and in the distance, he heard a wind that seemed to speak his name. The soft crunch of snow behind him made him turn, and he faced a legion of pale figures, with eyes as bright and cold as the deepest winter stars. The White Walkers. He sensed their power, older than the Targaryen line or the Andals, older than the First Men. Their presence brought a searing cold that froze even the intangible realm of vision. That was the true threat, the doom that overshadowed all mortal quarrels. He saw them set forth, unstoppable, a creeping winter that consumed everything. He felt his own helplessness, a single spirit in the face of cosmic inevitability. Then the vision shifted, and he looked upon the living realm. Armies marched, banners snapped in the chill wind, and houses of men spilled blood on the icy ground. Futile were their efforts against an enemy that felt no fear, no exhaustion. Death rolled over them like a tide. In the swirling depths of that vision, Rhaegar understood that all his earthly concerns, kingdoms, rebellions, prophecies, were but stepping stones in a grand narrative that was about to unfold once more. He saw the cyclical nature of it, the seasons turning, the threats from the far north returning, the realm unprepared each time. His heart thundered. What good was controlling the past if the greatest threat lay in the present and future? In the end, all roads circled back to one point. What was Rhaegar's duty now that he wore the mantle of the three-eyed raven? He knew that at some moment, the powers that guided him would expect him to choose. Would he remain an impartial observer, facilitating the rightful path for the next mortal greenseer? Or would he, with Targaryen boldness, intervene to shape the threads of time itself, forging a different path that might save countless lives? He awakened from that vision trembling, cold sweat clinging to his brow. His hands, once calloused from swordsmanship, now felt stiff and cold. He had not moved from that cluster of roots that formed a natural throne beneath the weirwood trunk. Overhead, the red leaves whispered, and the carved face in the trunk oozed a crimson sap that reflected the color of the Targaryen dragon. He felt his mind drifting, once again tugged by memory to the day he first understood his father's madness. He had been only a young man, standing beside the throne as Eris raved about traitors within every shadow. Rhaegar had tried to reason with him, to gently steer him from the path of cruelty and suspicion, but the seeds of madness had taken root too firmly. If only Rhaegar could step into that moment now and whisper sense into his father's mind, quell the paranoia. Perhaps the tragedy of the realm could have been avoided. Perhaps Rhaegar would not have needed to gamble everything on the illusions of prophecy. Perhaps the rebellious lords would not have found reason to rise up. The line of Targaryens might have continued unbroken. And yet something about that notion rang false in the quiet corners of his new consciousness. Perhaps the Targaryen line was fated to break, fated to scatter, so the realm could unify once more in the face of the great other. Perhaps an unbroken Targaryen dynasty would have never yielded the heroic alliances needed to fight the threat beyond the wall. As the old gods saw it, time was both fluid and unyielding, a puzzle box whose shape was not easily changed without consequences. Rhaegar recalled the swirl of visions in which wars raged on, no matter which small thread he pulled to alter the tapestry. It seemed that destiny course corrected with a pitiless logic, forging new roads to old ends. Still, the temptation to try pricked his heart, for he did not want to stand idly by while the songs of the living played out in anguish. With each passing cycle of night and day, he drifted further into the currents of knowledge. He could feel the swirl of history around him, like a great celestial wheel, rotating and rotating until the lines between past, present, and future blurred. He saw visions of the Red Keep's throne room, quiet and layered in cobwebs. He saw a young Targaryen child with the starkness of white hair wandering halls he did not recognize, guided by a distant voice. He saw war at sea, ships burning, dragons swirling overhead. He saw men and women he did not know, carrying sigils that meant nothing to him yet. He saw a great council convening to choose a new king, the realm in a fragile peace after a long, harrowing conflict. Each glimpse was a piece of a grand puzzle, but none told him precisely how to preserve mankind. Instead, they showed him possibilities, forks in countless roads that all led eventually to cold and darkness, or to a faint hope that flickered in the distance. He remembered how, in life, he was so certain that prophecy would deliver the realm from doom. He studied the scrolls of ancient seers, the writings left by Aegon the Conqueror, the interpretations of Daenerys the Dreamer. He believed in a grand design, and that if only he could read it correctly, he would become the hero that Westeros needed. How naive that seemed now, perched in the eternal hush of the weirwoods, seeing that no single hero or moment could hold back the tide of winter. The realm's fate was shaped by countless decisions, countless moments of courage or cowardice across time. In the tapestry of the old gods, men and women stood together or fell apart, and that was how the balance was maintained or lost. A single individual might be the catalyst, but the burden was shared by multitudes. Yet he had come too far to surrender to despair. Deep in the forest, the wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and whispering pines. A swirl of leaves skittered across the mossy ground, and the dappled sunlight overhead shifted like a living tapestry of gold and shadow. Rhaegar sat motionless, though he felt a tremor pass through him, as if the trees themselves were summoning him. The ancient energies coursed through the labyrinthine network of roots, the entire forest a living creature, and he was at its heart. With a single thought, he pressed his mind into that network of consciousness, allowing the past to roll over him. He found himself in the corridors of the Red Keep once more. In the vision, he was both an observer and a participant, disembodied yet intimately connected. He saw his younger self, dressed in polished armor, cloak trimmed with the red and black of his house. Musicians had just finished playing a gentle piece. In the corner of his eye, he noticed Elia Martell, glowing with quiet pride, as she watched him from a small dais. Further across the hall, a cluster of lords smiled and offered their congratulations on the birth of his second child, Aegon. The moment was joyous, a fleeting instant when he had felt true hope for the future. Then the dreamlike perspective shifted, and he saw a figure in the shadows, a man with shrewd eyes and a thin smile. Words were exchanged in hushed tones, warnings about the king's latest acts, about his cruelty in punishing supposed traitors. A flicker of doubt moved across young Rhaegar's face. Even then, the seeds of crisis had been planted. Rhaegar, the observer, hovered behind his younger self's shoulder, feeling the tension mount. He leaned closer as if he could breathe a word of advice, rally support among the lords more openly. Stand against Aerys's madness before it's too late. Encourage the realm to see that a Targaryen prince can be wise, just, and merciful. But as soon as the thought formed, the vision wavered, like the surface of a disturbed pond. He heard a rush of ancient voices swirl around him, rebuking or warning him. The vision collapsed into swirling motes of light, and he was thrust back into the silent grove, breathing hard, sweat beading on his brow. Time did not welcome such meddling. Exhaustion weighed on him. His limbs felt as though they had become an extension of the weirwood's roots, bound to the forest's ancient will. He could no longer be certain he was wholly alive, or whether he was drifting somewhere between memory and myth. He understood that the old gods demanded subtlety. If he was to do anything, it would require the gentlest of touches. He recalled how the previous three-eyed raven had sought to guide individuals through cryptic visions, half-remembered dreams, fleeting sightings of a crow with 3 eyes. Perhaps that was the path. Perhaps he could whisper to the right people at the right time, encourage them to act in ways that steered history ever so slightly. If he tried to seize the tapestry and weave a new pattern with force, he might destroy it altogether. He tried once more, this time, focusing on a smaller shift, something that might ripple out but not break the loom of time. He pictured a day, many moons before the rebellion began. A day in which he had visited the crypts beneath Winterfell. He remembered traveling north for a tour, fostering goodwill among the lords of the north. At the time, Ned Stark was a boy, quiet and steady as stone. Rhaegar recalled an odd moment of kinship with that young Stark, a sense that here was a man who, like him, yearned for a peaceful realm, but would do whatever duty demanded. The vision came slowly, forming around him in silent gray stone. Torchlight danced on the walls, illuminating the carved effigies of ancient Starks. The hush in that crypt was like a living presence, as if the dead watched from their tombs. He caught a glimpse of his younger self standing with Ned, exchanging polite words about tradition and family. He tried to lean into that moment, to brush the edges of Ned's mind with a faint whisper. He recalled that Ned Stark was a man of unwavering honor, a trait that would guide him to the end. If Rhaegar could but sow a tiny seed, suggesting that the realm's best hope was unity, that not all Targaryens were like the Mad King, perhaps that might have changed something. As he concentrated, he felt a stir in the vision. His younger self was speaking, but the words were muddled. The stone walls flickered. Another presence intruded, some intangible force that seemed to cast a shadow across the scene. The crypt grew colder. A swirl of snow or dust drifted across the floor, and Ned's figure blurred. The voices in Rhaegar's head grew frantic, urging him back, warning him of dangers unseen. Then the entire vision dissolved like dust in a storm. He gasped for breath in the real world once again, his eyes flying open to the blood-red leaves overhead, his heart pounding in his chest. A faint ache throbbed behind his temples. Controlling the past was no trivial feat, and though he possessed more power than any mortal before him, the old gods reined him in. The forest stirred. He felt the ancient eyes upon him. Had he gone too far? Time passed again in that place between the moments. Rhaegar found a measure of acceptance. If the old gods would not permit him to bluntly rearrange events, he might still glean the knowledge necessary to guide the living. Perhaps that was the true purpose of the three-eyed raven, not to shape the world to his will, but to ensure that the world had the guidance needed to survive the long night. If he could not resurrect or protect those he loved from their mortal fates, at least he could ensure that their sacrifices meant something in the greater scheme. One morning, though morning was only a guess, for the filtered sun was faint and green in the gloom of the forest, Rhaegar felt the forest's hush deepen. The wind died, the animals grew still, and a tingling awareness prickled along his skin. A presence approached. He closed his eyes, letting his consciousness drift, and felt a distant mind searching for guidance. Someone walked in a dream, perhaps a girl or a boy, a mortal who had tapped into the power of the Green's ears, or the old gods. Could this be one of the Starks? He reached back, carefully, gingerly, letting only a thread of his essence flow forth. He sensed confusion, fear, a yearning for answers. This young soul was close to the weirwood net, almost as if they had stumbled upon it by accident. Rhaegar realized that for the first time, a living person was actively seeking the realm of the three-eyed raven. He wondered if he should reveal himself, or remain hidden behind the mask of ravens and cryptic dreams. He allowed a crow's caw to echo in that distant dream. A subtle sign. He let a fleeting image of a silver-haired figure appear in the swirling darkness, but as soon as he did, he felt the tension in the forest. The old gods seemed watchful, alert. Slowly, Rhaegar withdrew. This mortal was not yet ready for a direct encounter, but a seed had been planted. A sense of wonder, a faint recollection that might lead them to the forest's heart. In time, perhaps this person would become his student, or perhaps surpass him. Rhaegar felt no envy in that thought, rather a sense of anticipation. He recalled his own younger self, thirsting for knowledge about prophecy, the rightful heir, the songs of ice and fire. For all his missteps, that thirst had defined him, and now he was in a position to grant or withhold knowledge from those who followed. Whether he granted it gently or forcibly shaped them with it, was the moral test of his new existence. Trees creaked in the breeze, and the forest's hush bled into the murmuring stream nearby. A squirrel darted through the branches overhead, pausing to watch him with curious eyes. The creature was not afraid, for it sensed that he was now as much a part of the forest as the branches themselves. He wondered, in a quiet moment of reflection, whether he had finally found the peace he had yearned for in life. He recalled how, as a boy, he was drawn to books and music more than war. He had believed himself a warrior only because prophecy demanded it, but his true soul was that of a poet. Now, in the forest's cradle, he could contemplate the deeper mysteries of existence, free from the burdens of mortal politics. The cost, of course, was everything he once loved. Family, children, the dreams of building a better world. Now, ironically, he might hold the power to help shape a better world, but only by letting go of personal attachments. Time spiraled around him once more, drawing him deeper into the labyrinth of visions. He saw swirling scenes of men and women he did not know, a queen with fierce eyes astride a mighty dragon, a king in the north rallying armies to fight an unearthly menace, a cunning imp orchestrating alliances from the shadows, a tall woman with golden hair forging a path of redemption, their faces blurred with the ephemeral glow of prophecy. He heard the roaring of dragons, the clash of steel, the crack of ice, the moans of the undead. The tapestry was vast, weaving itself into patterns that were as beautiful as they were terrifying. In each thread, he caught fleeting echoes of the Targaryen name, the Stark name, the Lannister name, and a host of others that whirled together in the forging of a new destiny. Rhaegar understood that if the living could not unite, all would be lost to the creeping cold that devoured the future in his visions. He breathed out, and in that breath, he spoke words he had once sung by the fireside with his harp in hand. But now, those words carried the resonance of the weirwood's power. The forest itself seemed to hum with the melody, leaves rustling in a subtle chord of harmony. Perhaps his gift for song could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. In the hush, he sang a single phrase, a half-forgotten lullaby in High Valyrian, something his mother had once sung to him when he was small. The melody floated among the trunks and branches, and for a moment he sensed the forest tilt its head, listening. Was he singing only to himself, or might those in distant dreams hear the song? He continued to sing softly, letting the lullaby spiral out into the currents of time. He pictured the Starks in Winterfell, the Lannisters in Casterly Rock, the Tyrells in Highgarden, the Martells in Sunspear, the Baratheons in Storm's End. He offered a gentle call, an invitation. Let them remember that there are forces older and stronger than petty wars, that the realm itself needs unity. If any hearts were open, they might receive a faint chord of comfort or curiosity. It was only a minor act, not enough to shape events, but enough to leave an echo in the tapestry. The cost was small, and the forest did not resist. Perhaps the old gods found no fault with a lullaby. Yet for all his progress, the question remained, would he attempt a greater alteration? Night descended in the forest, the stars shining through the canopy like scattered diamonds, and Rhaegar felt the call of memories once more. He allowed himself to slip into a deeper state, bracing his mind for another confrontation with the raw edges of history. His mother, Queen Rhaella, swam into focus. She was younger than he remembered, her hair pinned high, her face proud but kind. He saw himself as a child clinging to her skirts. He saw her sorrow each time the king ranted, each time he punished those who displeased him. She would coax Rhaegar away, trying to protect him from witnessing the worst of his father's cruelty, but the knowledge seeped in regardless. He approached that moment carefully, as if stepping onto fragile ice. He felt his mother's heart break like a knife in his own chest. If he could do anything for her, if he could spare her the tragedies to come. But no. To unravel, that would be to unravel all. The rebellion, the forging of alliances, the heartbreak that shaped the Starks and Targaryens alike. These events led to the births of heroes, not yet named. Life was a tapestry woven from suffering and joy in equal measure. He dared not tear too large a hole in it. He withdrew from the memory once more, his spirit heavy with resignation. Morning came, or something like it, soft light dancing upon the forest floor. The hush broke as birds began to chirp. Rhaegar opened his eyes, content to watch the subtle beauty of the living world. For a time, he simply observed, letting the natural rhythms soothe his tormented reflections. A stag drifted among the trunks at the edge of the grove, its antlers a regal crown. It paused, sniffed the air, then vanished silently into the undergrowth. This was life, fleeting and free, unconcerned with politics or prophecy. Rhaegar felt a hint of envy. Then he felt gratitude for the fleeting presence of that animal, a reminder that the realm was bigger than the Targaryen line, bigger than the tragedies that had shaped him. He settled against the old bark, and the weirwood seemed to wrap a comforting root around his left ankle, as if to anchor him gently. He felt the forest's acceptance. In his heart, he knew he was no longer the Silver Prince with a harp and a dream. He was something else, a being anchored between past and future, perhaps the last line of guidance for humanity against the encroaching dark. The old gods had chosen him, or accepted him, because some part of him was always meant to see beyond mortal limits. If he could not save himself, he might yet save the world. The thought brought a bittersweet twinge, reminiscent of the chords he used to play on his harp when his voice was alive with hope. The hours drifted on in timeless fashion. He watched the shifting shadows, listened to the caws of distant ravens, and occasionally let his mind wander into the vast tapestry for fleeting glimpses. He sensed that the lines converged upon certain people, certain moments, forming knot points in the weave of fate. He recognized that soon, mortal players would stand on the stage of history, forced to unite or die. He saw that his role was to guide them, nudge them, and offer wisdom in subtle ways. The living had free will, but sometimes a whisper in a dream could tilt the balance between despair and resolve, or between hatred and compassion. That was the power of the three-eyed raven. It was not an ability to command the past to rearrange itself at a whim. It was an ability to ensure that the present marched forward as it must, armed with every possible advantage. When night fell again, starlight sprinkled the clearing, and Rhaegar sank into a final meditation. He let go of regrets one by one, the fate of Aelia and their children, the memory of Lyanna Stark, his father's madness, the dream of the Iron Throne, the false certainties of prophecies. It was not that he forgot them. He honored them, preserved them, but set aside the pain and guilt that burdened him. He was no longer a man who could chase redemption through mortal means. His path was now bigger and more mysterious. If only he could have known this peace in life. If only his father had found this stillness before succumbing to darkness. If only the lines of Targaryen kings had known how small their crowns were in the face of the forest and the old god's infinity. But there was no place for bitterness. Time and tragedy had brought him here, to this seat among the roots, the calm eye in the storm of history. He slept, or at least drifted in a realm of half-consciousness, lulled by the symphony of leaves. In that trance, he felt the shift of energy when a living soul stepped into the edge of the grove. Whether it was day or night he could not tell, but he sensed the presence of another. Carefully he opened his mind's eye, and through the branches he saw a figure robed in furs, face half concealed by a hood, eyes wide in wonder. The figure stood hesitant, as though drawn by an invisible string. Leaves crackled underfoot. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Rhaegar watched through the weirwood's countless eyes, letting no move betray his presence just yet. The figure advanced slowly, drawn perhaps by the legends of the three-eyed raven. Rhaegar felt anticipation swirl in his chest. Was this the one who had appeared in dreams? Or another entirely? Did they come seeking knowledge? Salvation? He quieted his mind, sinking further into the trunk, letting the carved face above him remain the only visible observer. He would watch this mortal, gauge their heart and intentions before deciding whether to reveal himself. So it began, the next chapter in a story older than the Seven Kingdoms, older even than the first men. Quietly, the old gods stirred, and the weirwoods whispered in a language as old as the earth, welcoming a new pilgrim to the realm of the three-eyed raven. Rhaegar's heart quickened, for in this meeting he might find a path to fulfill his duty, a final hope for a realm that desperately needed guidance against the looming winter. Yet as the figure stepped nearer, Rhaegar glimpsed the dancing orbs of curiosity in their eyes, and he felt something else too. A spark of the same longing that once drove him to chase the songs of prophecy. It was a reminder of who he had been, who he still was in some corner of his soul. He breathed in, letting the hush settle again, and waited. This would be his moment of truth. Despite the centuries of knowledge swirling within him, the heartbreak and wisdom gleaned from life and beyond, he remained a soul capable of yearning. He yearned to save, to heal. He yearned to do what no mortal or greenseer had fully succeeded in doing before. Avert the coming catastrophe and spare the realm from endless night. Whether or not it could be done, whether or not the old gods allowed him to shape the tapestry beyond subtle guidance, was a question only time would answer. But Rhaegar Targaryen, the once silver prince, the once doomed heir, the wandering poet who believed in destiny, now sat enthroned in the living wood. He closed his eyes, felt the forest breathe with him, and whispered to the hearts of men, in a voice they would hear only in their dreams. If the tapestry of fate held any mercy, it might yield a precious gift. A second chance, however small, to honor the realm that had once seen him only through the bloodshed of war. Thus did he begin his quiet vigil. Hands resting upon ancient roots, song woven into the rustling leaves, awaiting the mortal who would step forward and join him in forging the next verse of the grand song of ice and fire. Wah, ya kei. The figure in furs stepped hesitantly between the towering weirwoods, guided by something both intangible and insistent. A soft hush clung to the undergrowth, and their steps rustled the brittle leaves that had drifted down from high boughs. In the half-light, the tall white trunks appeared like pale sentinels, their carved faces solemn and watchful, each mouth frozen in a perpetual whisper of ancient truths. The figure paused near the edge of the clearing, feeling the currents of unseen power swirl around them. Beneath that hood, a pair of eyes widened with reverent fear. Though the robed traveler could not yet see the one seated upon the roots, they sensed the presence that thrummed like a distant heartbeat within the forest. A faint breeze stirred, lifting the edges of the visitor's cloak. The air smelled of damp bark, rich moss, and something older, an earthy tang that evoked stories told around northern hearths of green's ears and children of the forest. All was still as a painting. Slowly, the visitor ventured farther in, each footstep sounding too loud in that hush. Branches bowed overhead. Leaves fluttered as if in gentle applause, whispering secrets to one another about this new arrival. The robed form carried an object clutched to their chest, something wrapped in leather. There was a wary tension in the way they gripped it, as though it might be both their shield and burden. Closer they crept, guided by that silent pull. And then they saw him. At first, it looked as though the weirwood's trunk had grown a living face, or that one of the carved visages had shifted in the moonlit gloom. But no. There was a man seated within the roots, silver hair streaked with white, skin as pale as the bark that enveloped him. His eyes were half-lidded, the faint light revealing pupils that seemed glazed with distant visions. The swirling lines of the trunk curled around his arms and legs like a patient serpent, as though the forest claimed him in some timeless embrace. A hush pressed upon the visitor's ears. They felt a gentle thrumming behind their ribs, and a whisper in the corners of their mind told them this was indeed the three-eyed raven of legend. He did not stir as they approached. Shadows curved across the sharp planes of his cheeks, and a faint breath parted his lips. Something in his stillness reminded the robed figure of an old statue, set in a tomb, except the presence here was undeniably alive. A sense of awe rooted the traveler in place. They let out the breath they had been holding, their heart pounding as if it sought escape. In hushed resignation, they sank to a knee, placing the wrapped object on the mossy ground. Their posture was not so much one of reverence as it was weariness, tinged with hope. They had journeyed long, guided only by persistent dreams and half-seen ravens that vanished when approached. The man in the roots lifted his head slowly. His eyelids flickered once, then focused with uncanny clarity on the kneeling figure. Despite the stillness of the glade, there was a feeling of electric energy in the air, as though an unspoken conversation had begun. The robed visitor reached up with trembling hands, lowering the hood to reveal a young face, haunted by sleepless nights and relentless visions. Whether they were a man or woman seemed secondary. What mattered was the hunger burning in their eyes, the quest that had driven them to set foot in this forbidden realm. For a moment, neither spoke aloud, as though bound by a vow of silence. Then, in a voice that was low and resonant with quiet authority, the figure among the roots whispered words that the traveler had never heard but somehow understood. "Why have you come?" The visitor's lips parted, uncertain. They glanced around, as if to confirm that these trees were not illusions woven by their own mind. The hush of the forest pressed in. At last a hesitant voice emerged. "My lord, or my guide, I have come seeking answers." The words sounded small in that space, like pebbles dropped into a vast chasm. "Dreams led me north. Whispers said that the one who sees beyond seeing dwells here. That's what I was said to say. Rhaegar Targaryen, though his name was unspoken, watched them intently, noting the quiver in their voice, the half-lowered gaze, the undertone of desperation. Through the web of the weirwoods, he sensed echoes of the traveler's trials. Nights spent shivering under starlight, abrush with wildlings on the edge of the haunted forest, the draining terror of dreaming of crows and snowy graves. Yet here they stood, still brimming with the raw determination that only those truly called could possess. He shifted slightly among the roots, a gentle rasp of bark against cloth. "Answers," he repeated, the faintest note of sorrow in his tone. The figure nodded, taking heart from the greenseer's response. They glanced down at the wrapped bundle. "I found something on my journey. I do not know what it means, only that I could not leave it behind." Carefully, with trembling fingers, they peeled back the leather folds, revealing an old piece of wood. Splinters and cracks marred its surface, but upon it were marks, perhaps runes or sigils, weathered almost to illegibility. It looked like it could have been part of a weirwood carving once, or a sign left by the children of the forest ages ago. Rhaegar's gaze flicked to it, though he did not move. In the deep channels of his new awareness, he recognized a faint hum of old magic. A lesser greenseer might have flinched from the tangled energies, but to him, it was as if one more puzzle piece appeared on a board of infinite complexity. He let the hush linger, weaving through the leaves overhead. Then, beckoning with only the barest tilt of his head, he invited the visitor closer. The figure swallowed, gathering courage, and rose from their crouch. They took uncertain steps across the moss, approaching until only an arm's length stood between them and the occupant of the roots. They offered the chunk of ancient carving with both hands. For a heartbeat, it seemed Rhaegar did not intend to accept it. His arms remained entwined by the bark, pinned or perhaps merged with the living wood. The forest shifted in a nearly imperceptible motion, releasing one of his hands. Gently, he took the fragment, cradling it as though it were a sacred relic. The traveler exhaled shakily, relief mingled with awe. They had not known if the greenseer would acknowledge their humble offering, or cast them out like an intruder. But the memory of the weirwood murmured in Rhaegar's mind, and he saw echoes of a distant past when a young child of the forest had carved lines into living bark, perhaps for worship or as part of a protective spell. Meaning had scattered across the centuries, but the power lingered. He closed his eyes. Images flickered through him in quicksilver bursts. He saw a time when the forest was younger, when the children gathered around a heart tree to sing. He saw a swirl of snow, a battered fortress of ice looming in the distance. He felt the primal fear of an enemy that came from the far north, blanketing the land in an endless night. The chunk of carved wood pulsed with echoes of that dread, as if it had borne witness to an age of terror. Rhaegar saw flickers of green fire dancing between slender, inhuman fingers, heard chanting in the old tongue. Then, with a soft jolt, the vision receded. He opened his eyes to meet the traveler's gaze. He wondered if they glimpsed the reflection of those ancient memories swirling in his pupils. The traveler's breath hitched, tears welling unexpectedly. They did not know why they cried, only that the intensity of the silent exchange felt overwhelming. The forest, too, seemed to hold its breath, as if listening for the greenseer's verdict. "This piece of wood," Rhaegar began softly. "It belonged to a doorway once, a gate carved by those who came before men. It was meant to ward against a great darkness. In picking it up, you carry the echo of that purpose." His voice wove through the quiet air, gentle yet weighted with knowledge. "And that darkness is stirring again." He lifted the fragment, the edges gleaming faintly in the forest's filtered light. "Why would you bring it to me if not to be rid of it?" The traveler shuddered, racked by the memory of dream voices that urged them north. "I felt I had to," they whispered. "In my dreams, I saw a raven with 3 eyes calling me onward. I saw the shapes of things in the snow, shadows with blue eyes. They whispered that the realms of men would be undone if I did not find my way here. I'm just a mortal soul. I know nothing of wards or magic. I only knew that if I turned back, the nightmares would devour my mind." "And..." Rhaegar nodded, hearing the ring of truth in their words. The tapestry of fate unraveled in his mind's eye, revealing subtle threads that had drawn this traveler to the grove. A swirl of possibilities shimmered, uncertain. He sensed that the future hung on precarious edges, shaped by more than one traveler, more than one king, more than one dreamer. Gently, he pressed the fragment back into the visitor's hands. "You are not rid of it yet. Keep it close. You may need it. The wards of old are not gone, only dormant." The robed figure stared at the piece of wood, swallowing past the lump in their throat. What would you have me do?" Rhaegar's eyes slid shut for a moment, as if in silent communion with the forest. The carved faces around them seemed to exhale, leaves quivering in a soundless sigh. In that ephemeral space, centuries unspooled, the forging of swords, the vows of the night's watch, the coming of the first snows that never melt. Through it all, Rhaegar saw that the living must stand united or perish. At length, he fixed the traveler with an unearthly calm. "In time, you will return to the realms of men. You will speak to those who have the power to rally armies, to shape hearts. You will warn them, though many may not believe. By then, you will be stronger in the gifts the old gods have stirred in you. The nightmares you faced shall guide you." "Done?" A fragile hope flickered in the visitor's eyes, but also uncertainty. Their voice wavered. "You speak of me as if I have some special role, but I am no hero. Even crossing the forest nearly killed me. I have only my dreams, and now this." They held up the bit of warding wood. "How can I stand before knights and kings to deliver warnings?" Rhaegar's features softened, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "None of us begin as heroes. When I was young, I believed a prophecy would guide me to glory, and that my birth alone would shape my destiny. I did not realize that a true destiny is earned and forged, often with great pain. You bear the seeds of that pain and a will to endure. That is enough to begin." "Netin?" He motioned toward the trunk beside him, where a carved face wept streaks of red sap. "Kneel there, before the heart tree," he instructed gently. "Place your hand upon its bark. Let the old gods see you." The traveler's eyes flicked to the solemn face in the trunk, carved long before any of their ancestors were born. The wood seemed to pulse with an inner life, as if awaiting contact. Cautiously, they obeyed, shuffling forward on their knees, extending a trembling palm to the rough white surface. The moment their skin touched the bark, a jolt of sensation traveled up their arm, a tingling wave that made their breath catch. For an instant, the traveler's eyes glazed over, pupils dilating as a swirl of images assaulted them. They glimpsed ancient battles fought in a snowbound wilderness, the silhouettes of slender, large-eyed children working strange magics, the flicker of red leaves overhead. They saw a man with silver-gold hair standing in a courtyard, harp in hand, and they heard the echo of a haunting melody. Shadows of memory fused with the traveler's own recollections in a dizzying flood. Rhaegar watched them carefully, poised to pull them back if the vision became too strong. "The forest breathes with you," he silently assured. "Do not fear." The traveler gasped, but they did not pull away. They gritted their teeth, enduring the torrent, letting the river of history flow. Then, as quickly as it had come, the vision receded, leaving only the hush and the rasp of breath. The traveler's hand remained pressed to the bark, but tears now coursed down their cheeks. Though they could not articulate what they had just experienced, the awe in their gaze spoke volumes. After a moment, Rhaegar placed his own hand atop theirs, and the bark shifted beneath his touch, almost as if it recognized him as part of itself. He closed his eyes, guiding the traveler's mind into calmer waters. "Peace," he whispered, a gentle note in the quiet glade. "You have seen too much at once. Let the memory settle." They exhaled shakily, feeling the tension in their muscles unwind a little. The Greenseer's presence was both comforting and unsettling, an immense well of power that brushed against their soul with a delicate hand. After another long moment, the traveler pulled back, sinking onto their haunches, cradling the carved wood fragment in one arm. Their voice trembled. "I saw so many things. Some I can't even name. Shapes of a long winter, a swirling darkness, children chanting in strange tongues. It was as though I lived 100 lifetimes in a heartbeat. Rhaegar nodded, understanding all too well. Such is the gift and burden of the Greenseer's domain. Many who come here never leave, for the weight of knowledge is heavy. He studied them. Yet you must leave. The world beyond these trees needs warnings only a dreamer can provide. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. If you remain, the old gods will weave you deeper into their tapestry, and perhaps your voice in the mortal realm will be lost. But if you depart, you must walk a path as perilous as these visions. Do you understand? The traveler swallowed hard. I do. A shaky breath followed. I came for answers, and I see now I am part of the question too. I will do what I must. Their hands trembled around the bit of wood. But, will you guide me? Rhaegar lowered his gaze, the silver of his hair catching in the faint beams of light that filtered through the canopy. I cannot walk by your side in flesh. This realm binds me just as I bind it. He shifted slightly, indicating the gnarled roots that claimed him. But I can guide you in dreams. When the time is right, you will hear my voice, just as you heard the raven's call. Trust the silences between thoughts, for sometimes in that hush, truth speaks. As you travel south, you may find others like you, scattered dreamers, those who have glimpsed the chill that lurks beyond the wall. Seek them out, lend them the strength you carry. Together you might rouse a realm content with squabbles and crowns to face the greater threat. Nin. The traveler blinked, lines of confusion marring their brow. How can I convince them? They have their own wars, their own ambitions. Even kings fail to unite the realm. How can I alone make a difference? A distant sorrow creased Rhaegar's face. He recalled how he had once believed in the unifying power of prophecy, in the might of a single chosen figure who could rally the realm. Yet after unraveling the tapestry of time, he understood unity was not a single chord, but a great symphony of countless voices. You cannot do it alone, he acknowledged gently. But you need not. Look for allies among the honorable, the broken, the outcast. Look for hearts that yearn for something beyond personal gain. A single lantern's light can catch in 1,000 mirrors, until the night is cast aside. Nah. His voice fell silent, and the traveler found themselves holding that gaze, feeling it bore into the core of who they were. The sense of awe they felt now mingled with a blossoming resolve. They were not sure where to begin or how to proceed, yet somehow they trusted that taking one step forward would reveal the next. They bowed their head, pressing a trembling hand to their chest in a silent vow. I will do all I can, they said softly, even if it leads me to ruin. A faint nod. Courage is born of necessity, murmured Rhaegar. And you have that in abundance, whether you know it or not. Slowly he closed his eyes. The hush swelled again, leaving the traveler to stand or kneel as they wished. It seemed to be a subtle signal that their audience was concluding, that the grove itself had granted what it could for the moment. They lingered, reluctant to depart without gleaning more. Questions crowded their mind, about the stranger with the silver hair, about the swirling illusions that haunted them, about the piece of carved wood clutched in their fingers. But some instinct told them further answers would only come with time, and that forcing the moment might shatter the fragile calm. Their legs felt weak as they rose, arms clutching the leather-wrapped fragment. The canopy overhead rustled, as if a myriad of ravens had taken flight, though the traveler saw no birds. It was only the forest breathing, or the intangible shift of the old god's attention. Before retreating, they gazed upon the Greenseer once more. His stillness unnerved them, but they had caught the flicker of humanity in his eyes, the echo of a man who once walked among the living. What tragedies or glories had shaped him, they could not guess. Perhaps in dreams, they might learn more. For now, they bowed deeply. Thank you, they whispered, unsure if the words were sufficient. A soft exhalation, nearly inaudible. Go with caution, he replied, voice fading. Do not let despair find you. When the hour is darkest, remember this place, and let hope guide your steps. With that, the traveler turned. Their cloak swept over the moss, leaving faint imprints of footprints that soon vanished in the leafy loam. The forest closed around them, branches forming a vaulted ceiling of red leaves and swirling motes of dust. Rhaegar felt their presence recede into the distance, drawn away by the demands of the waking world. For a time, all was still again, the weirwood's carved faces gazing blindly at the clearing. One by one, the small creatures of the forest resumed their quiet foraging, as though acknowledging that the moment for mortal intrusion had passed. Silence enfolded him. In that hush, he withdrew into the labyrinth of his own thoughts. The tapestry of visions beckoned, unraveling and reweaving with every passing breath. He saw the roads the traveler might take, glimpsed the dangers they would face, the disbelief of lords, the cunning manipulations of those who would use magic for their own ends, the creeping dread of winter's approach. He also saw slivers of possibility for alliances forming under improbable banners. Wolves and lions, dragons and krakens, flowers and suns, all forced together by the threat of an endless winter. In countless variations, the realm either overcame or fell to darkness. Every path shivered with the tension of the unknown. He sat in the cradle of roots, letting the fragile hope of that traveler spark his own memories. Had he once been so earnest, so eager to fulfill a grand design he only half understood? The recollection of his youthful idealism stung like a half-remembered heartbreak. Doubt. He had believed his songs could heal wounds, that prophesied destinies were as straightforward as following a map. But how the world had proven him wrong. Still, the faint ember of that dreamer's courage stirred something in him, a reminder that prophecy, for all its cryptic cruelty, was not entirely a lie. The realm did need dreamers, and it would need them even more in the days to come. Over the following days, or perhaps weeks, he immersed himself in the green dream again. He saw glimpses of the traveler passing through the forest's outskirts, stumbling upon half-hidden paths. He saw them startled awake at night by haunting nightmares. He sensed subtle reassurances, a faint glow of warmth in their darkest dreams, careful not to overwhelm their free will. Always, the forest reminded him that the mind of men was fragile and easily broken if a greenseer pressed too hard. Guiding them meant allowing them to find their own strength. Between these moments of quiet guidance, Rhaegar roamed the endless corridors of time. He revisited pivotal junctures, observing but no longer trying to force his hand. He felt an odd sense of closure watching his father's descent into madness, no longer burning with the longing to intervene. He peered upon the aftermath of Robert's rebellion, saw the sorrow etched in the faces of survivors, recognized how tragedy sometimes birthed resilience. When echoes of Lyanna Stark flickered through the weirwoods, her soft, haunted eyes, her lips parting in pleas that only the wind could carry, he felt the old ache stir. Yet he did not linger, did not let regret overtake him. He had accepted that some things must remain as they were. In the heart tree's domain, the passage of time was fluid. He was not sure how many nights had risen and fallen outside the forest's boundary. But in one silent interval, a trio of ravens descended into the clearing, perching on a low branch above him. They cawed in discordant unison, their black eyes fixed upon the man in the roots. He gazed up at them, faintly amused. And in that moment he felt the old gods direct his attention southward. A swirl of images flashed before his mind's eye, a gathering of lords, a tension-laden feast, a pair of cunning eyes glancing around for advantage. Then a shift. Moonlight upon a deserted tower, silent as a grave, a woman kneeling in heartbreak. Another swirl. A cold tomb in the crypts of Winterfell, candlelit and haunted by secrets. That final image lingered, and Rhaegar felt a deep pull. Something was about to be set in motion in the realms of men, and it would draw one of the Starks into the labyrinth of history once more. He listened to the raven's caws, letting the puzzle pieces align. Slowly he understood. Another dreamer might soon be awakened to the old god's call. It was not the traveler who had just departed, but someone else, someone bound by blood to the North's ancient lines. A quiet sense of resolve spread through him. This, too, was part of the design. The realm needed many watchers, many voices. He closed his eyes, reaching through the weirwood's vast root system, following the faint thread of connection that spread south. He moved gently, as though stepping across a frozen lake, so as not to break the fragile surface. He sought the mind that had stirred the old god's interest. He found the faint glimmer of dreams in a distant keep, where the temperature was cold and the stony halls older than memory. Within that dream he sensed flickers of direwolves, of ancient kings in the north, of crypts lined with statues. The dreamer's spirit was guarded, shaped by a sense of honor and duty. Rhaegar lingered at the fringes, not daring to push too far. The old gods hummed, directing him like a gentle current. He glimpsed the silhouette of a young man haunted by questions of identity and belonging. Snow crackled underfoot. A single word formed on the dreamer's lips, lost to the swirl of illusions. Then the vision dissipated. Rhaegar returned to himself, the echo of that name, Stark, lingering in his thoughts. In life, the Starks had intersected with his destiny, in fateful ways. Now, in this realm beyond realms, the threads were being tied anew. He wondered at the shape of the tapestry. Perhaps the traveler he had sent forth would one day cross paths with that dreaming Stark, forging an alliance of seers and watchers. Or perhaps they would remain distant, each fulfilling a separate but entwined role in the war to come. The weirwood net offered no certainty, only glimpses. It was like watching a grand stage from behind the curtains. The actors were dimly visible, but the final script remained unwritten. Time coiled on. In the hush of the forest, Rhaegar continued his vigil, half lost in visions, half aware of the mundane life pulsing through the woods around him. He found comfort in the presence of small creatures that flitted about, ignoring him unless seeking quiet shelter. A fox crept near the outer ring of the clearing one evening, its ears pricked as if it sensed something amiss. Rhaegar observed it with a gentle curiosity, recalling the nights he had once spent under starlight in the warm climes of Dorne, marveling at desert foxes that darted across the sands. Now bound by bark and root, he let these fleeting reminders of life's simple wonders wash over him, a balm for the heavier knowledge he carried. In stillness, he pondered the future battles that would test the Seven Kingdoms. Would dragons again blaze across the sky, forging a unity that eluded mortal men? Would the great houses bury grudges in the face of the White Walker's advance, or would old hatreds re-emerge at the worst possible moment? He saw so many branching paths. On one, a queen with silver hair and fierce determination rose to power, forging new alliances through fire and blood. On another, a king in the north was betrayed just as unity was within reach, unraveling crucial bonds. So many outcomes hinged on human choice and folly. Yet within each scenario, Rhaegar discerned the same undercurrent. The others marched, unstoppable, unless men and women overcame themselves. When he tried to see beyond the confrontation, the visions clouded, as if the forest itself did not know what lay on the far side of that cataclysm. The realm might flourish in a new spring, or vanish beneath eternal ice. Each time the image faded, leaving him with a quiet ache. In that ache, he found a reminder of the mortal perspective he had once possessed. Men cling to hope not because the future is certain, but precisely because it is not. So he continued to send out small ripples of guidance wherever he could. A raven in a dream, a whisper in the flicker of a torch, a fleeting image in a moment of doubt. Sometimes it might merely encourage a guard to keep watch a bit longer on a cold night, or nudge a heart to show kindness rather than suspicion. Each small act added a thread to the tapestry. If he could no longer ride at the forefront of armies or debate with kings, he would shape the realm from the quiet corners of consciousness. Seasons churned outside the forest. Some leaves turned orange and gold before falling. Others remained red as blood, anchored to the ancient weirwoods. The sun's angle shifted across the months, though Rhaegar did not measure time in the ways men did. He measured it in the patterns of the green dream, in the expansions and contractions of the realm's fate. He sensed the creeping tension beyond the wall, the freezing storms that gathered strength like a curled fist. He sensed the cracks forming in alliances, the false sense of security that overcame many in the south, lulled by political intrigues and petty feuds. He caught glimpses of the traveler who had knelt before him, crossing a stone bridge in a mountainous region, the carved fragment of wood wrapped tightly in a cloak. Their resolve had not flagged, though they walked alone. He saw them approach a small settlement, wariness in their eyes. That image too receded. In his own domain, the nights grew quiet, the days quieter still. The children of the forest, if any lingered nearby, did not approach. They respected his solitude, perhaps knowing that he balanced on the thin line between time's unstoppable current and the mortal realm's illusions of control. Occasionally, he felt their presence at the edges of the grove, soft footsteps on damp leaves, hushed voices in a language older than men. They never spoke directly, but he sensed their acceptance. Once, he felt the barest brush of a hand against the trunk behind him, the gesture fleeting but tender. The children remembered how he came to replace another greenseer who had once guided them. They recognized the cycle continuing, each greenseer leaving their mark, then dissolving into the living memory of the wood. He recalled how, upon first awakening in this place, he had questioned whether he could rewrite his own past, salvage lost loves. Now, though he still felt a pang of yearning at times, he no longer sought to break the tapestry for personal gain. He saw how each thread, even the darkest, had led to the present necessity. Without the heartbreak of war, the realm would never have gained the hardened souls it might need. The child of House Stark, who lost so much, the disinherited princess who found new strength beyond the narrow sea, the cunning dwarf forging alliances with wit rather than birthright, they were all shaped by sorrow and conflict. In that shaping, Rhaegar saw the seeds of the realm's potential salvation. Men who had never known suffering rarely became its champions. He let go of regret, slowly, day by day, as the trees might shed leaves. In its place, he nurtured the slender branch of hope that new living souls would grow strong enough to ward off the cold darkness. Perhaps that was the role of each greenseer in turn, to witness the tragedies of the past, to guide the living toward a precarious future, and to surrender illusions of absolute power. Even as a Targaryen prince, he had never truly commanded fate. Now, as the three-eyed raven, he understood his place. Caretaker, messenger, silent watchman over the realm's entwined stories. One evening, as the moon rose over the canopy, he sensed a stir in the net of weirwood consciousness. Far to the south, the traveler approached a seat of power, trembling but resolute. Rhaegar felt their thoughts flicker with fear. How to speak to lords who did not want to hear about undead horrors? He sent a gentle wave of encouragement, a faint image of the heart tree, the lullaby of leaves. The traveler steadied. He sensed them stepping into a hall, voices rising in disbelieving tones. Tension escalated. Then the vision slipped from him, too many mortal minds swirling in that space for him to track. He withdrew, trusting in the seed of courage planted in that lonely soul. In the hush of the glade, he murmured a quiet thanks to the old gods for letting him share in these fleeting glimpses. He listened to his own heartbeat, felt the pulse in the trunk at his back. They had become one, the greenseer and the weirwood, yet the shape of his personality remained. He had not dissolved entirely. That, too, was a mystery. He wondered if the old gods had once been men or children of the forest themselves, unified into a collective memory that spanned eras. Perhaps in time, he would unravel that final mystery, or perhaps it would elude him. Either way, he had chosen acceptance. Time wove on, dream by dream. He guided other unsuspecting mortals who found themselves stumbling into the green realm. Some only touched it lightly, spurred by a sudden intuition to move their villages farther from the wild places. Others glimpsed horrors in the night, pressing them to fortify walls or gather provisions. A few responded with cynicism, ignoring the warnings, but Rhaegar did not force them. He had learned that fear and denial were as much a part of mortal nature as courage. Slowly, however, he sensed a shift. Whispers spread like dandelion seeds on the wind. Tales of the coming winter took on a sharper edge. Disparate pockets of the kingdom felt an undercurrent of unease that no political victory could fully dispel. The traveler's journey, though barely begun, was setting small sparks of flame across a wide land. On one cold afternoon, a swirl of snow drifted into the grove, dusting the roots with a fine white powder. Rhaegar glanced at the sky beyond the canopy. Winter had begun to stake its claim more strongly, even in the deep heart of the forest. He inhaled, the crisp air biting his lungs, and felt a pang of urgency. Time was drawing short. He had no illusions that the traveler alone could rouse the entire realm. Others would need to carry the warning, not just dreamers, but leaders. A memory of his mother's gentle hand brushing through his hair rose in him unexpectedly. She had once whispered to him about the burden of kingship, and how wisdom often came too late. He closed his eyes, letting the sting of tears come and go. Too late for him, perhaps, but not for the living. He descended into the green dream one more time that night, focusing on the faint threads of those who might unite the kingdom. He glimpsed a young warrior forging uneasy alliances, a queen negotiating with uncertain lords, a wolf-blooded girl lost in illusions, and a brotherhood armed with something more than steel. Each thread felt fragile, susceptible to betrayal or tragedy. Yet he also sensed a resilience in their hearts, forged by all they had endured. With a careful thought, he extended a whisper to each, a flicker in their sleep, a distant chord strummed on a forgotten harp, a nudge reminding them of unity, of the fleeting gift of life. He could only hope they would interpret the dream fragments wisely. In the forest a night passed, and another dawnlight filtered through. Rhaegar opened his eyes to find the clearing touched by the glimmer of frost. He felt the bark cool against his skin, as though the trees had drawn deep breath in anticipation of a great trial. For an instant, he imagined himself standing on the trident again, the warhammer smashing into his breastplate. The swirl of water dyed red. It had been so swift then, so final. Now, he was suspended in a quiet that preceded a storm far greater than the rebellion that once claimed his life. In that final image, he sensed both acceptance and a flicker of determination. He had lost all once, but he would not lose all again. If he had any power to prevent it, he would use it. Not to rewrite his own story, but to safeguard the realm for those who still wrote theirs. He settled back into the roots, his posture regal even in repose. The slender lines of the weirwood wound around his arms, supporting him as if he were a great king upon a living throne. His eyes fluttered shut, and he let the hush enfold him once more. A memory of harp strings rose in his mind, and he imagined playing a lullaby for a sleeping child. Perhaps the child was every man, woman, and child in the 7 kingdoms, slumbering in ignorance of the encroaching dark. Gently, in the silence of his mind, he strummed that lullaby, letting it carry through the weirwoods like a call to wakefulness. If they would only stir, open their eyes, and see what gathered at the edges of the world. That was his final hope. And for now, it was enough. So the hours stretched into the timeless realm, the sound of distant ravens echoing through the red canopy. Rhaegar Targaryen, the three-eyed raven, the silver prince once doomed by prophecy, remained steadfast at the forest's heart. Dreams flowed in and out like tides, each one a story of men and women forging alliances or stumbling into ruin. Through it all, he kept watch, neither despairing nor triumphant. His vigil was without end, until the living no longer needed watchers, or until the forest itself fell silent beneath the white hush of everlasting winter. He prayed, in a quiet and wordless way, that the realm might learn to break free of the old cycles, that the tapestry might endure. And as his thoughts sank once more into visions, he heard the faint melody of a harp strumming somewhere deep in the dream, a song of hope and perhaps redemption carried on the whisper of leave. Night. A damp chill settled on the forest floor. Pale moonlight fell through thinning leaves, revealing a faint crust of snow that had gathered in the hollows between roots. Still enthroned among living bark and silent watchmen of white wood, Rhaegar closed his eyes and let the hush flow through him. Beyond the colossal trunks and woven canopy, the world stirred. Winter's breath whispered along the spines of mountains, across frozen moors, over half-buried roads that led toward lands brimming with doubt and small hope. He reached outward in his mind, riding the ancient currents of the weirwood network, seeking the distant heartbeat of the traveler who had once knelt at his feet with an offering of carved wood. In a swirl of faint color and half-felt emotions, he glimpsed the traveler. They were trudging along a narrow path that cut through wild pines whose branches bent under accumulated snow. Tired hoofbeats clopped at their side, a weary mule that carried a makeshift pack. The traveler's cloak, ragged and dusted with ice, offered little protection from the freezing wind. Nevertheless, They pressed on, breath steaming in the thin air, a determined light in their eyes. Though Rhaegar had only subtle means to guide them, he sent the faintest warmth along the thread that connected them. In the traveler's chest, there would be a slight easing, a reminder of the forest's silent reassurance. He let the vision fade. The traveler was not the only one forging paths across this realm. Others would be touched by dreams of swirling snow and raven wings. Each, in their own way, would shape the tapestry of the coming trials. Rhaegar felt the press of ancient eyes upon him. Perhaps the children of the forest hovered just out of sight, or perhaps it was only the hush of the old gods themselves. Whatever the source, the forest thrummed with quiet expectation. Night deepened. The moonlight turned the snow to liquid silver around the clearing. Rhaegar barely stirred, but in the recesses of his heart, he remembered what it felt like to walk freely beneath the moon, to feel the sting of cold on unbound skin rather than on flesh woven into roots. There was longing there, but not regret. He had chosen this path, or had been chosen, long before he ever set foot in the Trident's waters. With careful intent, he drifted into the currents of past and future, letting the forest cradle his consciousness. He found himself walking in a vision, through an abandoned courtyard strewn with broken stones. Snow piled high against a toppled wall, half concealing the sigil that might once have belonged to some lesser house. The wind moaned. In this dreamscape, not even crows dared call. A battered banner swayed on a rusted pole, its device unrecognizable beneath layers of ice. Rhaegar knelt, pressing a hand to the snow. He felt the echo of many footprints, of desperate men who had tried to defend this place. Whose keep had this once been? Time blurred in the green dream, so it might be a glimpse of a future ruin or past tragedy. A faint warmth drew him away from the desolate courtyard, back through shifting illusions, until he felt the pulse of flickering candlelight. He floated in a torchlit corridor, narrow and damp. The stone smelled of mold, and every footstep echoed. Two figures advanced side by side, both cloaked in darkness, exchanging hushed words. Rhaegar sensed intense determination in one, and growing fear in the other. "We can't linger," whispered the braver figure, glancing over a shoulder as though expecting watchers to emerge from the gloom. He said the White Walkers might already be stirring. "And you believe those tales?" the other retorted, voice trembling with poorly disguised doubt. "I've heard enough old wives prattle for one lifetime. I followed you here because I hoped there'd be treasure, or safe haven. Not more ghosts and winter demons. I believe them. I've seen the visions." The braver one paused, face half illuminated by the torch. Eyes glimmered with fervor. "Something prowls beyond the wall. I don't know how to make you believe, but—" They lifted a piece of carved weirwood from inside their cloak. Its surface bore faded runes. The swirl of old magic clung to it like morning mist. Rhaegar recognized it at once, the fragment that had brought the traveler north. The second figure shrank away, crossing arms over a rumpled cloak. "I've heard it all. Dead men walking in the night, ice spiders big as hounds, fairy tales." The traveler lowered their voice. "Say what you will, but we must keep moving. If they truly march, we need to warn someone. Anyone who'll listen." Naderdrol. Before the vision offered more, Rhaegar felt a shifting pull that drew him back into the forest, the mosaic of illusions dissolving into swirling motes of greenish light. He opened his eyes on the moonlit clearing, heart stirring with a subtle ache. The traveler had found at least one companion, though the cost of trust was high. Small alliances, faint flickers of hope. These would carry into the future, or so Rhaegar prayed. Time passed in slow rhythms. Frost thickened on the weirwood branches overhead, and red leaves fell in clumps, forming dark patches on the ground. A hush lay over the grove each morning, broken only by the soft scratch of small creatures hunting for seeds. Rhaegar kept watch, drifting between the realms of flesh and dream. He saw glimpses of lords bickering in warm halls, indifferent to rumors of northern perils. He saw merchants complaining that winter roads were nearly impassable. He saw the traveler and their reluctant companion pressing on, scavenging for food in deserted hamlets. The nights were unkind, the days colder still, But a light in the traveler's eyes never went out. Beneath the canopy's shelter, new footfalls approached the sacred clearing one dim afternoon. Rhaegar felt the tremor of a presence entering the edges of the forest, the subtle crackle of leaves under boots. Whoever came moved cautiously, with neither the sure step of a seasoned ranger nor the desperate shuffle of a lost wanderer. Rhaegar let his awareness expand, though he remained physically motionless in the cradle of roots. The old gods observed as well. Silent, but intent. A figure emerged between the trunks. They wore rough spun clothes patched at the elbows, a single dagger at the belt, but no sword. A hood covered much of their face, though an unruly lock of hair fell across a scarred cheek. Lips parted at the sight of the heart tree. The newcomer swallowed, eyes sliding toward Rhaegar. No words passed between them yet. Instead, the stranger stood rooted to the spot, hands flexing nervously as though torn between approach and flight. Rhaegar watched quietly, a faint stirring behind his pale lashes. He sensed this visitor was no mere wanderer. Within that mortal heart, he perceived flickers of regret and determination. Perhaps they had sought redemption or absolution in the legends of the old gods. The hush pressed in, nudging the stranger forward. At length, they obeyed, drawing closer until they stood within a few paces of the weirwood's enormous trunk. "I've come," the stranger began, voice rough as though from disuse. "I've come to ask for guidance, or forgiveness." A tremor traveled through slender fingers. "I don't know which. The dreams wouldn't let me be. A crow with 3 eyes flew into my window, pecked at the shutters until I woke. In my dream, it led me here." "Neolor Bua." They bowed, though uncertainly. Rhaegar felt the faint flicker of a memory. Another pilgrim from so long ago, a supplicant seeking an end to nightmares. He inclined his head, acknowledging the visitor's presence with quiet solemnity. A stirring in the branches overhead made the newcomer glance up, eyes darting from one carved face to another. The hush weighed on them, and they sank to their knees on damp moss. "I did things in the war," the visitor confessed, gaze lowered. "Cruel things. I told myself it was for my king. But now, at night, I see them, those I harmed. Their eyes accuse me in the dark. Then the crow appears calling me north, calling me deeper into these woods. Is it punishment or mercy? I can't tell any more." The question hung in the chill air. Rhaegar listened, his heart resonating with an echo of sorrow. So many were scarred by the wars of men, guilt clinging like a shroud that no confession could lift. He sensed that the forest did not judge in the manner of mortal kings. The old gods recognized that all living souls bore darkness and light in their hearts. Perhaps that was why they permitted such souls to find their way here, drawn by silent dreams. The newcomer's voice quavered. "If the visions are real, if there's an evil beyond the wall, perhaps my blade could serve a better cause. Maybe I can atone by fighting for the living. I just need—" They glanced around, half-dazed. "I need to know if the dreams are telling me the truth." A gentle gust swept through the clearing, stirring the red leaves overhead. A few fluttered down, soft as a whisper, landing at the newcomer's feet. Rhaegar felt the forest's subtle ascent. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, and let his consciousness brush against the newcomers. Their nightmares rose to meet him, images of flames, of blood, of a dozen eyes staring lifelessly. He felt regret welling behind each memory. Carefully, he extended a thread of reassurance, letting the pilgrim sense that the path of atonement was real. But it would require action, not words. The stranger inhaled sharply, as though startled by an unseen presence. Then, in the hush, Rhaegar's voice found shape in the visitor's mind. "You cannot unmake what has been done," he said gently, though no audible sound passed his lips. "You can only choose another road. If you truly wish to defend the realm against the cold darkness, follow your dreams. Let them guide you to the far north. There you will find those who gather to guard against what lurks in the icy wastes. Offer your blade, and remember your guilt, that you may never again misuse it." A soft gasp escaped the stranger's throat. They bowed, pressing their forehead to the mossy ground. "Yes," they whispered, tears quivering on their lashes. "I will go. I promise." Something in them released, as though the very act of confession had lightened their load. They remained kneeling a moment longer, collecting themselves in the hush. Then, they stood on unsteady legs, offering the silent figure in the roots a final, grateful bow. Turning, they disappeared among the trunks, footsteps quieter now, as if peace had stilled the tremors in their heart. Rhaegar observed their departure, sensing that the old gods watched as well. Perhaps in time that scarred warrior would stand side by side with the traveler, or with others yet unknown, forging a defense for the realms of men. In this small exchange, Rhaegar felt a fleeting warmth, something akin to hope. Each soul he nudged toward a higher calling was another thread woven against the tapestry of doom. In the days or weeks that followed, more fragments of mortal drama came to him through the weirwood's silent net. He saw the traveler and their companion approach a modest hall, belonging to a minor northern lord. Their clothes were tattered, their limbs stiff with cold, but they gained entry by virtue of the carved fragment they bore, its runes stirring old legends among the keep's few inhabitants. The lord, an older man with salt and pepper hair, listened with a guarded expression. The traveler spoke of icy nightmares and undead foes, voice shaking but resolute. Most of the hall's onlookers murmured skepticism, yet a few, recalling the ancient tales, stood silent and thoughtful. Rhaegar lingered in that vision, heart pounding with unspoken encouragement. He saw the old lord swirl a cup of ale, gaze flicking to the traveler's runic wood. Laughter rippled among some of his men, but the lord held up a hand for quiet. "I was a boy when my grandsire claimed he saw a corpse walking in the far north," the lord remarked, brow furrowed. "They named him mad, yet he went to his grave swearing it was true." A long pause followed. "I won't dismiss you out of hand. Remain here tonight. On the morrow we'll speak of how you came by that carving, and what you mean to do with it." Gratitude shone in the traveler's eyes. The vision faded. Rhaegar felt a subtle ripple in the tapestry, a new possibility forming. If that lord could be swayed to prepare his holdfast, if his men took watchful positions on the northern roads, perhaps others would follow. It was a small step, but even the mightiest avalanche might begin with a single stone. Snow lay thick in the forest clearing as Rhaegar surfaced from the dream. Overhead the day's light was cold and gray, giving the bark a milky pallor. The hush felt deeper than ever. In that stillness, Rhaegar recalled his old life. The hush of the Red Keep's library at twilight, the quiet murmur of water in a fountain courtyard. Never had he known such absolute stillness. Winter pressed in on every side, muffling every sound. Even the animals seemed to slumber in dens, leaving the sacred grove empty of all but ancient ghosts. He realized that, for the first time in many nights, he sensed no approaching footsteps, no voices seeking guidance. The memory of each who had come here remained, but no new soul disturbed the frozen hush. He settled into the living cradle of roots, arms half entwined by bark. Snowflakes drifted lazily, settling on his hair, though the cold barely touched him. He let his thoughts roam. In the swirling expanse of time, he glimpsed a different vantage. A ragged band of wildlings trudging through waist-deep drifts, eyes hollowed by hunger. One wore the pelt of a polar bear, towering over the rest, face set in grim determination. They were fleeing south, something behind them on the wind, an unearthly shriek that drove fear into the boldest heart. Rhaegar felt the chill of that sound echo through the vision, so alien and relentless. The wildlings did not speak of it, lest naming it make it real, but all knew it was there. He reached out, hoping to guide them, but the wildlings carried no faith in the old gods of the weirwoods. They trusted only the harsh rules of survival. His influence was minimal, no more than a fleeting sensation that made one of them glance at a certain path. Perhaps that path might lead them to safety, or to some chance encounter with the Night's Watch. Rhaegar could not be certain. He could only plant the barest nudge, hoping fortune might favor them. The vision dissolved into flurries of snow and darkness. As the hush reclaimed him, he became aware of a subtle presence in the trees. It was not mortal footsteps this time, but a watcher of another kind. Somewhere beyond the innermost ring of heart trees, small figures peered from behind gnarled trunks. Rhaegar sensed their quiet breathing. The children of the forest had come again. He did not turn his head. He merely let them know, through the resonance of the wood, that they were welcome if they chose to approach. A moment of stillness followed, and then a single child emerged, footsteps silent as moonlight on water. She was slight, with large liquid eyes and moss-green hair braided down her back. Her hands were slender, her fingernails sharper than a man's would be, and her ears came to points at the tips, betraying her ancient lineage. She paused near the outer edge of the clearing, studying Rhaegar with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Another pair of children hovered behind her, half concealed by a thick trunk. He could sense a ripple of their shared awareness, each child part of a collective older than humankind. They spoke in a language of softly chiming syllables, nearly beyond the range of mortal hearing. Rhaegar caught only fragments. They knew of him, of course, as they had known the Greenseers before him. Yet, they rarely intruded. This time, perhaps drawn by the deepening winter or the tremors in the tapestry, they came bearing a purpose. With slow, deliberate movements, the foremost child approached. In her arms, she carried something shaped from the pale wood of a dead weirwood branch, a small sculpture carved with swirling lines that resembled vines and leaves. Her eyes met Rhaegar's, and in that gaze he read an invitation. She placed the carving at the base of the heart tree, then retreated a half step, kneeling in the snow. Rhaegar inclined his head in return, understanding that this was some form of offering or communication. Silence stretched. The other two children emerged, each carrying a similar carving. They set them around the trunk, forming a half-circle of wood sculptures that faced him like silent witnesses. In the hush, Rhaegar felt the old gods stir, an ancient echo resonating through the bark. Was it a ritual to bolster the forest's wards, or perhaps a form of prophecy in the children's tradition? One of the children pressed a small palm to the trunk, eyes closed. A wave of faint greenish light shimmered over the bark, so subtle that it might have been a trick of the imagination. Rhaegar felt a tremor pass through him, from fingers to spine. The children's language then brushed his mind like a gentle wind. We strengthen the circle, Greenseer. The winter grows bolder, and the night that comes is long. Will you carry our plea to the watchers among men? Through the silent communion, Rhaegar responded. I do what I can. Some among men listen, but many are deaf to what lurks beyond their walls. He sensed sadness in the children's shared consciousness. They had witnessed countless cycles of strife, each generation repeating the mistakes of the last. And so we gather, they whispered, weaving spells as old as the first dawn, that men might yet survive the darkness. Rhaegar watched the subtle glow fade from the trunk, saw the children lower their hands. They moved in tandem, as though choreographed by an unseen conductor, retrieving the wooden sculptures and carefully placing them around the clearing at precise intervals. Each figure faced the center, as if guarding an invisible boundary. A hush, deeper than any Rhaegar had experienced, settled over the space. He felt the stirring of forces older than the Targaryens, older than the first men. Something intangible wound through the air, uniting the carved shapes, the living heart tree, and the children's presence. Then in unison, the children bowed to Rhaegar. Their luminous eyes shone with an otherworldly grace. Without speaking further, they slipped back among the trunks, their footfalls soundless on the snow. He sensed them vanish into the deeper recesses of the woods, leaving only the hush and the faint shimmer of newly placed wards. A stirring of gratitude and sorrow flitted through him. The children did not fight men's wars, yet they never ceased to protect the land that men and children once shared. He breathed out, wishing that men would honor such devotion. Another dream claimed him that night, though it was fractured with glimpses of many faces. He saw a tall woman in battered armor kneeling by a frozen river, reciting a vow to protect the innocent. He saw a red-haired girl in a distant keep, pacing her room with grim resolve, plotting something that might unite scattered forces. He glimpsed a hooded man crossing the sea, haunted by nightmares of the dead rising. Each face carried a shard of the realm's fate, each unwittingly woven into the tapestry Rhaegar guarded. He woke to find dawn light gray upon the clearing, a scattering of new snow upon his shoulders. The wards the children had placed emanated a gentle pulse, a reminder of unseen guardianship. Rhaegar felt how they made the entire grove hum, with a subtle barrier against the cold evil that prowled beyond. Even so, that cold evil would not be stopped by words alone. Sooner or later, the living would have to stand and face it. In his half-slumber, he drifted again toward the traveler's path. Their journey had led them from that minor lord's hall to a rougher country. The roads were hardly more than rutted tracks through bleak hills and pine forests. The traveler's companion seemed subdued, uncertain how far to continue this mad quest. Yet the old lord, moved by a spark of belief, had given them a second mule, some supplies, and a letter bearing his seal in case they found more open ears elsewhere. Not a grand army, but a crumb of hope. They crested a ridge in the dream, a bitter wind howling. Below lay a crumbling watchtower from the days of the first men. The traveler glanced back at their companion, voice breaking the stillness. "We'll take shelter there for the night." "Ay," muttered the companion, reluctant. "But if the tales are true, that tower might not be empty." It was an ominous thought. Still, they urged the mules onward, determined to find any refuge from the biting cold. Rhaegar followed them with his greenseer's sight, as one might watch old friends from afar. Overhead, dark clouds gathered. Dusk approached swiftly, painting the sky in bruise-colored shades. The traveler guided the mules inside the half-collapsed courtyard. The tower's walls stood precarious, wind whistling through unseen cracks. "Better than freezing out in the open," murmured the traveler, though doubt laced their voice. They led the animals to a sheltered corner, then scouted the tower's interior. The companion huddled near the base of a broken staircase, rummaging through saddlebags for a flint and tinder. The traveler ventured deeper, a torch in one hand, the carved wood fragment tucked in their belt. Shadows leaped and danced on mossy stone walls. Rhaegar's vision followed them, a silent presence at their shoulder. He sensed something uneasy in that place, perhaps only the residue of old battles. The traveler's footfall echoed strangely. They paused at an ancient archway leading to a spiral staircase that wound downward. A cold draft exhaled from below, stirring the torch flame. A sense of being watched prickled the traveler's neck. Cautiously, they descended, each step tentative. The gloom thickened. At last, they emerged in a small vault, half collapsed, with a faint stench of stagnant water. Broken crates and rusted weapons lay strewn about. A hush deeper than the grave stifled the air. The torchlight flickered over old bones in a corner, perhaps the remnants of a desperate stand. The traveler inhaled sharply, fighting the urge to retreat. They laid a gentle hand on the carved fragment at their belt, drawing a measure of courage. Suddenly, a faint scraping noise echoed behind them. They whirled, torchlight slashing across the darkness. A figure stood near the stair, hunched and trembling, face hidden in the gloom. The traveler froze, heart hammering. For an instant, they thought it might be a soldier's ghost or some lost straggler. Then the figure moaned, a low, rattling sound. As it lumbered forward, the traveler caught a glimpse of pallid skin and eyes that held no spark of life. An icy blade of terror cut through the traveler's chest. They jerked back, almost dropping the torch. The silhouette advanced, awkwardly, as if its limbs did not obey living instincts. Gray, withered flesh glistened at the edges of torn clothing. It moaned again, the sound chilling as wind through a graveyard. The traveler's mind reeled. Was this one of the whites from the old stories, an undead thrall that served some unknown master? Upstairs, the companion's voice called out, "Are you all right?" Footfalls hurrying closer. The traveler tried to shout a warning, but fear constricted their throat. They staggered away, torch upraised. The white lurched into the light, revealing a face contorted in an endless rictus, lips peeled back from blackened teeth. On its chest, a rusted dagger hilt jutted from a half-healed wound, as though someone had tried to kill it once already, and failed. "Stay back." The traveler finally found their voice, though it shook. They fumbled for a weapon. Heart pounding. The companion appeared at the stairwell, torch of their own in hand, and gasped at the sight. The stench of decay thickened in the air, cloying and vile. The white hissed, stumbling toward them with arms outstretched. The companion recovered first. dropping their torch to seize a hatchet from their belt. "Ghoul!" they spat, swinging wildly. The blow connected with the creature's shoulder. Rancid flesh parted, but the white did not cry out. It reeled sideways, then lurched forward again, seemingly impervious to pain. The traveler raised their own blade, remembering half-heard legends that fire might be the only true remedy against such undead abominations. "Push it back!" the traveler cried, voice echoing in the cramped vault. Together they shoved the white toward the far wall, pressing in with the hatchet and the traveler's short sword. It snarled, snapping its jaws in a grotesque mimicry of life. A scuffle ensued, boots scraping on wet stone. The companion lost footing, falling to a knee, and the white seized that chance to claw at them. Its nails raked cloth and flesh, drawing a pained shout. Desperate, the traveler thrust the torch into the white's face. Flame caught on its hair, setting it ablaze with a hiss and sizzle. A noxious stench filled the room. The creature writhed, arms flailing. "Now!" the traveler shouted. The companion, wincing, swung the hatchet again, this time cleaving the white's neck halfway. The blackened flesh did not sever cleanly, but the white's motions grew uncoordinated. Together, they pressed the attack, hacking it down until it ceased twitching, the body smoldering on the stones. Silence fell, broken by heavy breathing. Smoke coiled in the torchlight. Both travelers stared at the unmoving husk. At last, the companion exhaled, voice quivering with pain and revulsion. "Seven hells, it's real." The traveler nodded, stomach churning. They crouched to examine the white's remains, half fearing it might rise again. Up close, they could see frost-crusted skin, as though it had roamed the cold for days or weeks beyond death. A wave of nausea rolled through them. They had believed, in a corner of their mind, that they might be chasing legends. But here was proof, reeking and undeniable. They leaned on their sword, trying to steady trembling legs. "Come," gasped the companion, pressing a hand to a bleeding scratch on their arm. We should burn it properly, gather more wood. We can't let even a trace of that thing remain." They half limped, half ran upstairs, hauling wreckage from around the tower to build a pyre. The traveler let the carved fragment of weirwood slip from their belt and laid it aside, not wanting the new flames to mar its surface. They worked in tense silence, piling broken crates, half-rotten beams, anything that might feed a fire. Then they dragged the remains onto the heap, sprinkling oil from a small flask. When the torch touched the pyre, flames leapt up, devouring the foul corpse with a roar. Acrid smoke billowed, stinging their eyes. They stood side by side, huddled close, the heat of the conflagration battling the chill seeping through the tower's cracks. Each reflected on how narrowly they had escaped. The traveler's mind roiled with images of the white's lifeless gaze, the terrifying strength behind rotting limbs. If such creatures were marching south, how many more might there be? The thought left them hollow with dread. They prayed the minor lord who had shown them mercy would spread the word, and that others would heed the warning in time. Far away in the weirwood grove, Rhaegar surfaced from the vision with a jolt, as though he too had fought that undead horror. The taste of smoke lingered in his nostrils, though it was only the ghost of a dream. He felt both fear and relief swirling within him. This was the face of the true enemy, the horror beyond mortal squabbles. So long as men refused to believe, these nightmares would multiply. He closed his eyes again, letting the hush envelop him. Snow drifted down in a silent dance, settling on leaf and branch. Through the weirwood net, he sought glimpses of other watchers. On the wall itself he sensed a tension among the black-clad brethren, some who had glimpsed terrors in the far north. They whispered among themselves, uncertain but fearful. Elsewhere, in a grand southern hall, a queen feasted with her court, oblivious to the creeping menace. In the east, distant dragons soared on the edges of rumor and prophecy, their riders dreaming of conquest. Yet none realized how quickly an endless night could swallow all. Rhaegar prayed in silence that the traveler's encounter might serve as proof to those who still doubted. In time, the story would spread. A half-ruined tower, a walking corpse, fire that alone granted rest to the undead. Perhaps, It would inspire more to take up arms, or to fortify their walls. At the very least, the traveler and companion would know that the danger was all too real. They might speak with renewed urgency when next they knocked on a lord's door, or confronted a line of soldiers. He sank deeper into the bark's embrace, half lost in swirling visions. The children's wards glimmered around the clearing, standing sentinel against the creeping cold. Outside, flurries thickened. In the south, rumor carried faint signals that roving bands of wildlings were surging toward the wall, fleeing something they dared not name. The tensions among the great houses might yet overshadow such warnings, but Rhaegar clung to hope that small voices might tip the balance. He recalled the sound of the traveler's heartbeat, resolute in the face of terror. That spark of courage was not easily extinguished. Darkness swept over the forest. The night felt boundless. Rhaegar heard, in the recesses of his mind, the distant howling of direwolves, a lament that seemed to echo from a place too far to reach. In that lament, he sensed both mourning and resolve, an ancient cry that once served as the heartbeat of the North. He wondered if the wolves howled for the living, or for the dead who walked again. Perhaps both. He let the lull of the forest carry him into older memories. He recalled how, in life, he had believed that a single prince or hero could save the realm, fulfilling an ancient prophecy. Now he understood that the realm's salvation would require every sword, every banner, every humble spirit willing to face the unimaginable. Perhaps one figure would stand at the heart of that alliance, but it would be a collective struggle nonetheless. As a Greenseer, he could do no more than offer glimpses of truth and hope that the living responded. Sometime before dawn, he sensed footsteps again at the edge of the clearing. Light, hesitant steps. He opened his eyes to see a young man approach, cheeks raw with cold, eyes red from exhaustion. Snow clung to his uneven beard and the furs wrapped around his shoulders. He stumbled closer, breath ragged. Unlike the previous visitors, this one carried a short spear slung across his back, and a half-ruined shield strapped to his arm. A fresh cut bled along his temple. He paused upon seeing Rhaegar ensconced in the roots, mouth falling open. "You?" he began, trembling. He glanced around at the silent faces carved into the weirwoods, as if expecting them to scowl. Then, in a husky voice, he added, "I was told to find the raven with 3 eyes, that you could show me the truth." He eased forward, half collapsing into the snow, spitting out a curse. "The White Walkers came to our village. They took my daughter. I saw her vanish in the storm. I followed footprints, but the wind erased them. I've searched for days, but..." His voice cracked. Pain radiated through his words. Rhaegar sensed the father's desperation, the terror of not knowing if his child was alive, or if some worse fate had befallen her. The old gods held their silence, for not even they could undo what was done. Rhaegar extended a thread of empathy, letting the father feel the presence of a power beyond mortal understanding. The man winced, tears freezing on his lashes. "I beg you," he whispered, "just show me if she's alive. Please." Rhaegar's chest tightened. He let the hush hold them both, then closed his eyes, seeking. The forest shivered, opening a window in the tapestry to reveal fleeting glimpses. He caught sight of drifting snow, a half-buried settlement, scattered huts. A handful of wights roamed at the edges, their eyes pale in the gloom. Among them stood a smaller figure, her head bowed. Rhaegar flinched at the sorrow in that image, uncertain if it was truly the man's daughter or a trick of the swirling illusions. But the silhouette, slender and unsteady, suggested a child enthralled by death's cold embrace. He withdrew quickly, the vision scalding him with its hopelessness. Opening his eyes, he met the father's anguished gaze, and felt the weight of truth. The child was lost, taken by the icy forces that gave no mercy. No flicker of living warmth remained. Gently, Rhaegar let the father sense this, though he tempered the brutal fact with compassion. The father recoiled, pressing his hands to his face. A raw sob tearing from his throat. Snow cushioned him as he collapsed onto hands and knees, each ragged breath stifled by grief. Rhaegar wished he could give comfort beyond cold truth, but the tapestry of time allowed no illusions. The father's sobs echoed off the silent trunks, carrying bitterness that no dream could mend. At length, the man lifted his head, eyes wild. "Then she's gone. She's..." He could not finish. "What do I do now?" Rhaegar's voice, though silent to mortal ears, formed in the father's mind. "Avenge her, if you must call it that. But vengeance against an enemy who does not feel is a hollow victory. Better to fight so no other child is lost." The father closed his eyes at these words, trembling. "I have no home left," he murmured. "No reason to return. If the living need spears, mine is theirs." A single nod. Then Rhaegar felt the father's anger stir. It glowed like a coal amid the ashes of heartbreak. He understood that anger could be a destructive force, but sometimes it propelled mortals to do what they must. If that fury found direction, it might yet become part of the realm's defense. Let it be so, Rhaegar thought, watching the father gather himself. The man bowed clumsily, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Thank you," he choked out, though gratitude and grief coexisted in a storm behind his eyes. He pulled himself upright, leaning on the spear. "I'll go. Maybe the Night's Watch will take me, or some other gathering of men who'll stand against this. I can't let them roam free while I do nothing." Without waiting for a reply he could not hear, the father staggered away, leaving footprints that quickly filled with new fallen snow. Rhaegar listened to his retreat, until the hush reclaimed the clearing. Another broken soul, another vow forged in sorrow. If enough of these wounded, determined spirits rallied, might they turn the tide? He dared not assume victory, yet each vow gave him a glimmer of faith in mortal resilience. Time drifted onward, in the forest's silence. Rhaegar's existence became a series of visions punctuated by intervals of reflection. Sometimes he sensed days passing outside the grove. Sometimes it seemed only moments. Clouds swirled overhead in an unending winter sky, and occasionally, bright sunrays cut through, casting the clearing in dazzling silver. The children of the forest visited twice more to adjust their carvings, chanting soft words that made the air shimmer. Rhaegar watched them, grateful for the presence of allies so ancient and steadfast. He remained aware of the traveler and their companion, forging onward through the battered north. The new knowledge of whites fueled their mission, giving them a grim determination that overshadowed fatigue. Gradually, they gained a handful of followers, refugees fleeing some destroyed hamlet, a spare knight who had lost his lands in a local feud, an acolyte of the old gods who recognized the runic fragment. They formed a ragged band, half-starved and fearful, yet resolved to warn as many as they could. Rhaegar sensed that some lords brushed them off as panicked vagrants, but others listened, especially when told of the white in the tower. Seeds of caution took root in unsuspecting hearts. Preparations began in corners of the realm that might otherwise have sat idle until the storm broke over them. On another night, Rhaegar glimpsed a gathering at a snowbound keep, its lord grim-faced as he heard reports of the undead. The traveler's band stood before him, trembling from cold, anxious for any sign of hope. The lord scratched at his beard, eyes distant. "My father told me stories of the long night. I always dismissed them. Now, what choice do I have but to believe you? Look out the window. Winter swallows everything." He paused, glancing at the runic fragment. "Yet how can we fight what doesn't die?" The traveler lifted the runic piece. "With flame, steel, unity, whatever it takes, we've seen a white fall to fire, and there are old magics left in the world." They looked at the handful of watchers in the hall, guards, lesser knights, villagers seeking shelter. "But none of us can stand alone." A murmur passed through the onlookers, uncertain but fearful. Rhaegar sensed the shift in the keep's atmosphere, the slow, reluctant acceptance that the threat was real. Alliances could form in the wake of that acceptance. Perhaps with each small victory of belief, men drew one step closer to uniting against the great other. In the hush of the Weirwood Grove, Rhaegar pondered how best to strengthen these flickering alliances. He had no illusions that a single traveler could rally the entire realm. The traveler's role was but one spark among many. Through other dreamers, other sightings, even the half-forgotten warnings recorded in ancient tomes, the truth would spread, word by word, soul by soul. The realm might awaken to the dreadful dawn that threatened them. As the nights grew ever longer, he felt a tremor in the tapestry. Far north, beyond the wall, a host was gathering. Silent, relentless, guided by a will as old as the night. The dead did not need rest. They marched in lockstep, as unstoppable as the glacier wind. Rhaegar shuddered at the flicker of that vision, seeing a swirl of ice, the faint glow of blue eyes. He sensed something more ominous behind them, a presence that overshadowed even the White Walkers. The shape of the Great Other, intangible yet potent, pulsed like a black star in the dream. He withdrew, unwilling to stare too long into that abyss. The weirwoods offered him solace, and he felt the ancient wards hum again, like a shield around his spirit. The children's magic, woven in quiet unity with the old gods, kept the darkest nightmares at bay. Even so, he understood that if the living failed to unite, not even the heart trees would remain untouched. A hush deeper than midnight settled across the forest. In the gray half-light of dawn, Rhaegar found himself recalling, unbidden, the day he first picked up a harp in the Red Keep, fingers trembling on the strings. He had been a boy of no more than 7, uncertain of his worth in a court overshadowed by madness. The memory brought a faint pang of longing, for the innocence of that child had been short-lived. The realm had needed a hero, and Rhaegar had tried to fill that role. Yet, all his prophecy-laden yearnings had led to a bitter end, culminating in the swirl of blood and water at the Trident. Now, ironically, he was closer to fulfilling a role of true savior, by guiding others, by weaving subtle dreams, by helping the realm prepare. Not through a single grand gesture, but through countless small ones. He found a certain peace in that realization. Perhaps the children of the forest, in their quiet ways, had always understood that every seed matters. The sun climbed higher, though its rays were feeble in the cold sky. Rhaegar felt the forest stir. Another presence, or perhaps multiple presences, lingered just out of sight. He listened with senses beyond mortal ken, hearing the soft crackle of snow underfoot. Then, from the corner of his vision, a group emerged. 3 silhouettes wrapped in thick furs, each carrying a staff or spear. They halted at the edge of the clearing, gazing with wide eyes at the labyrinth of towering weirwoods. They muttered among themselves, glancing at Rhaegar, uncertain. One had a bandage around their forehead, dried blood marring the cloth. Another supported a limp. The third, smallest of them, clutched a tattered scrap of parchment. They spoke in quiet, urgent tones, but no words carried clearly across the hush. With caution, they approached. Rhaegar noticed how they stared at the heart tree's carved face, at the living bark that framed his form. He felt a flicker of curiosity. They seemed driven, as though something spurred them to reach this holy place despite injuries and fatigue. They stopped a short distance away, and the tallest among them spoke, voice ragged. "We followed the legends. The children said a great green seer dwells here, one who sees beyond. We've come to beg your aid." They exchanged glances, unsettled by Rhaegar's silence. The one with the limp stepped forward. "We were attacked by creatures in the night, half-rotted and feral. We escaped, but not all of us. Now we've learned of a gathering point, a place where men stand against the dead. We must find it. Please, can you show us the way?" Rhaegar regarded them. He sensed hope in their hearts, mingled with desperation. He let his mind open, seeking images of roads and fortresses. Perhaps they referred to a rumored stronghold in the north, or a newly fortified keep. The tapestry showed glimpses. A small fortress near a frozen river, banners newly hung, survivors trickling in from all directions. Yes, a place of refuge and resistance, uncertain but determined. With careful purpose, Rhaegar closed his eyes, allowing a swirl of dreamlike impressions to form. The trio gasped, each seeing in their mind's eye a stretch of forest. A landmark boulder shaped like a wolf's head, a winding track leading to a stony gorge. Beyond that gorge rose the silhouette of stout walls braced against winter's fury. The vision lasted only a heartbeat, but it lit their minds like a beacon. When it faded, they blinked, breathing hard. exchanging wide-eyed stares. "The Wolf's Head Rock," murmured the limping traveler. "I've heard tales of it. We're not far if we can skirt around the great pine stand." Hope kindled in their voice. "We might make it before the next storm." The tallest bowed their head, trembling with gratitude. "Thank you," they whispered, tears threatening. All three lowered themselves in reverence, as though expecting a formal benediction. But Rhaegar merely inclined his own head in acknowledgement, letting them sense his unspoken blessing. He felt no need for worship. His duty was to guide, to help the living find safe harbor. If they survived, they might become part of the growing force that would one day stand against the endless night. They lingered a moment, perhaps wanting to ask more, but some instinct told them the Weirwood Grove was not a place for long conversations. With hushed words, they hoisted their packs and turned to go, each step carrying them away from the hush and back into the uncertain wilderness. Rhaegar watched their silhouettes vanish between trunks, footprints soon lost in drifting snow. Another subtle chance at survival, woven into the realm's pattern. He lifted his gaze toward the canopy, where red leaves quivered like silent tongues. The day's pallid light lent the forest an otherworldly glow. So many had come seeking the three-eyed raven's guidance. Some driven by guilt, others by terror, others by a flicker of faith. Each departure chipped away at Rhaegar's isolation, forging a thin but vital connection between him and the people he served. He felt no triumph. He felt only a quiet resolve that this work must continue, drop by drop, until the realm either united or succumbed. He settled deeper into the roots, letting the hush cradle him, and allowed his mind to roam far afield once more. High in the mountains, storms raged, sending avalanches crashing into lonely passes. Along the coasts, icy winds froze harbors, cutting off trade. In castle after castle, lords and ladies huddled around fires, whispering about the severity of this winter. Somewhere in a southern city, a self-assured noble shrugged off the rumors, content to profit from others' desperation. The tapestry danced with light and shadow, hope and greed, heroism and cowardice. Rhaegar observed, searching for ways to tip the balance. Hours bled into evening. The forest grew darker, the wards placed by the children faintly pulsing, fending off the deeper chill that pressed against the grove's perimeter. Rhaegar's breathing slowed, his consciousness floating between centuries. He recalled the face of Lyanna Stark, the sorrow in her eyes, and let the memory pass like a wandering ghost. He recalled the taste of ash and cinder in King's Landing after the horrors unleashed by his father. Another ghost, drifting onward. He thought of his own children, lost in the flames of a war he had helped ignite. The ghosts would always be with him, but their agony no longer paralyzed him. He had found purpose in the present, in this vigilant watch for the living. Night swallowed the last rays of twilight. The cold air felt sharper, as if it carried shards of ice. Rhaegar inhaled the scent of bark, of snow-laden pine, of distant fires that mortals lit against the darkness. He exhaled, letting the hush reign once more. His mind wandered, weaving with the forest's ancient currents, listening for souls who cried out in dreams. Some nights he found no one, only the quiet of a world too weary to dream. Other nights, the illusions of 1,000 sleepers clamored at once, each demanding solace or answers. He did what he could, drifting from dream to dream, sowing small seeds of caution or courage, encouraging alliances, shining faint light where despair crept in. At intervals, he paused to reflect on how close the final confrontation might be. The traveler had encountered a wight. Others had glimpsed dead things stirring. Wildlings fled. The watch grew restless. Rumors spread south, colliding with skepticism and cynicism. The lords of the realm were not wholly united, but a flicker of alarm had begun, as unstoppable as the winter storm. Rhaegar let the hush lull him into a deeper trance. His final act before dawn. In that trance, he descended into the labyrinth of time, searching for any thread that might reveal a path to victory. He saw threads of madness and betrayal, threads of bravery and union. He saw dragons lighting the sky with fire, uncertain if they soared in salvation or destruction. He saw Starks and Targaryens, Lannisters and Baratheons, Tyrells and Martells, forging uneasy truces or renewing old feuds. The possibilities branched endlessly. Yet amid the chaos, he glimpsed small shining points where the traveler's warnings took hold, where scattered survivors found refuge. He saw men forging dragonglass weapons in hidden forges, old knowledge rediscovered in dust-laden tomes. He saw torches lining the battlements of a mighty wall, watchers scanning the horizon with dread. And in the heart of all these images, he saw the living flame of human spirit, refusing to die even when the night pressed close. He emerged from the trance, breath uneven, eyes bright with a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. If the realm could harness that spirit, if enough voices called for unity, they might yet turn back the tide. Hope was fragile, but as persistent as a stubborn weed in the cracks of a frozen path. He would nurture it as best he could, guiding the traveler and any others who carried the torch of warning. In the silence, dawn began to lighten the sky above the canopy. The wind sighed through branches stiff with frost, scattering a few red leaves onto the snow. Rhaegar closed his eyes and let a faint, bittersweet smile grace his features. The old ghosts of regret, the old illusions of single-handed salvation, gave way to something more profound. He was a part of the forest, of the old God's watch, of the realm's communal fight for survival. That was enough. When the light strengthened, it found him still in place, silver-white hair dusted with snow, pale eyes half-lidded in eternal vigilance. A hush lingered. But it was a hush brimming with life and possibility, not void. Softly, the wind carried with it the echoes of distant voices, mortals braving the cold to stand for something greater than themselves. Each footstep beyond the forest boundary, each newly lit torch on a cold battlement, each vow spoken in trembling desperation, fed the tapestry of resistance. And as the day broke, the three-eyed raven watched over them, unwavering, intent on guiding them through the approaching darkness with every breath he had left.